It's time for Tim Drake, the third Robin. I love Tim. I love talking about Tim. I don't love drama. At least I get to talk about one of the things I like today. Greetings, comic lovers, and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old to history to anecdotes, really wherever our whims take us. When you keep up with comic book news or move in circles where it pops up, there are certain things that kind of rise to the top of what people are talking about. We've had a bunch of those of late. Batman doesn't go down, I am not Starfire, and this. Those are all completely different things, but they've all captured the cultural zeitgeist in different ways. So our instance that we're talking about occurred in August of 2021, although it was built up to before that. This is in the form of a retcon to Tim Drake, the third Robin, in the form of changing his sexuality, though some will argue that it wasn't changed at all. I'll explain later. Strap in. Knowing me, this is gonna be a long one. We're gonna be here a while. Got big hair for this. Need the big hair energy to tackle this. We're gonna take a look at Tim, we're gonna take a look at the comic this occurred in, we're gonna discuss the atmosphere and the reactions to it, which are not all what you would expect or all coming from where you would expect. As always on this channel, when these vids come up surrounding controversial fare, this is not a bash fest or a love-in. It's an examination, an analysis, a pondering. So if you're here, it's because you want to hear it all, or most of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the cringe. But basically, if you're here looking for a rant or just whether I like or dislike it, this is not the video. There are plenty of other videos like that out there though. These topics can be difficult to discuss for several reasons. One, knee-jerk reactions and assumptions. This can happen because when there are likes, dislikes are as ambivalent to the change in question. Blanket statements of if you liked it, you're not a true Tim Drake fan, or if you hated it, you're homophobic or against change. And if you're ambivalent, how can you not care? This is the biggest news ever. And of course, when comments are nasty or vitriolic, charged or bigoted, this of course sets the stage for poor discourse. That's of course a cliff notes, but it happens a decent amount. Some of this comes from the fact that people experience and interpret entertainment media in different ways. Also, sometimes people are having two different conversations as a result of that. For example, someone talking about something from a narrative or continuity standpoint versus someone talking from a representational standpoint. And both can be quite emotionally charged, as there can be a connection to something more than just the work itself, whatever the stance. And then also assumptions can be made because of one's viewpoint that the other person must be thinking that way, or covering something up, or the like. So sometimes people can end up stepping on each other, or dismissing each other without even meaning to, or perhaps meaning to. And then of course, some people are just jerks. That was a long preamble. Now let's talk about Tim and who he is now we got here. But before we get started, I'm Sasha, and if you're enjoying this content, you know what to do. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, join us in this comic book journey. Now, in order to understand some of this reaction, you need to know a little bit about Tim. A lot about Tim. I was gonna say this is gonna be cliff notes, but this is gonna be a lot about Tim. Well, let's talk about him. Tim Drake is the third Robin, who first appeared in Batman 436 in 1989, but he wouldn't become Robin until Batman 457 in 1990. He was created by Marv Wolfman and Pat Broderick. The name Tim was given to him in honor of Tim Burton and the at that time just released Batman 1989 film, because it kind of revitalized Batman for the mainstream, made him more serious, because at that time period that was a serious take on Batman. The last time he'd really been on the screen, it had been the 60s, and that was very, very campy. Tim was given a slow burn introduction so that the audience would really get to know him. This was because they wanted to avoid the mistakes they'd made with the second Robin, Jason Todd, post-Crisis, when they had changed his origin. They'd given him a more angry, brash persona, and it hadn't gelled with everybody, and it resulted in that infamous poll where people could call in to vote whether he lived or died. Although a lot of people post this era have come to really like post-Crisis Jason for making him different from Dick, whereas before, when he debuted in all of his ginger glory, he was essentially a Dick Grayson clone. Now, Tim was introduced as a detective-style character, deducing who Batman was and the like. He befriended Nightwing and slowly worked his way into the Bat family, convincing Batman that he deserved to be Robin, that Batman needed a Robin. He had two story arcs that build into this: Rites of Passage and Identity Crisis. No, not that Identity Crisis. Bad stuff happened to Tim in that Identity Crisis. His dad died. Now, Robin proved to be a hit, and he was given a 5-issue mini, Robin, which proved so successful they did two spin-off minis, Robin 2, Joker's Wild, and Robin 3, Cry of the Huntress. He then became the first Robin to have his own solo series, which lasted from 1993 to 2009, and it lasted 183 issues. I just realized how excited I sound. I'm really excited about Tim. Tim Drake was unique in that at the start he had his own family, so he wasn't living with Bruce and he wasn't adopted by him or his ward, at least not at the start. That would happen later. Now he's Tim Wayne. So at the start he had to balance keeping his Robin identity a secret, his home life, and school. He was presented in such a way that it seemed like he was going to be the natural successor to Batman, like he was being groomed for that position. And so for a time period, stories that were cast into the future would place him in that role. And his own books weren't the only place that he was hanging out. He was also a founding member of Young Justice alongside Con-El, aka Superboy, and Impulse, Bart Allen. He would then later be on the updated Teen Titans. also with Connor. Him and Connor have quite the history. It's quite close, and there are some who read it through quite the shippy or queer lens, because some people feel that it's ship fodder and other people feel that it's queer coding or canon. And also it was something that some writers played into. And again, there's a question of, was that pandering or was that coding? Basically, Tim was everywhere. He was a fixture of the DC universe, and it seemed like he had a solid position. He was going places. He was much beloved in his heyday, and he still is by many. Now, relationship-wise, he's known for a couple of key relationships, although he has had many pairings. He's best known for his association with spoiler Stephanie Brown, who would later become Robin and then Batgirl, and then well, the New 52 happened, but we'll get there. He would also have a period where he was dating Stephanie as Robin, but then somebody else as Tim, Ariana, just Cat City. He also helped Stephanie through her pregnancy, so that cut extra deep. As mentioned, he had a very deep friendship with Connor, which led to many shipping them. Now, in canon, he would end up dating Cassie Sandsmark, who was Connor's girlfriend for the period that Connor was dead. He was a little brother to Nightwing, and he was able to hold his own despite his sidekick status. But slowly things around him began to change, Batfamily-wise. First, the revival of Jason Todd. Now, this didn't impact Tim all that negatively. In fact, it actually gave him more stories because of how Jason viewed him as a replacement and a pretender and all of these things. He really didn't like him at the start. However, the biggest change for Tim in the beginning of his descent into, oh god, what do we do with him, was definitely the canonical introduction of Batman's son, Damian Wayne. The biological son of Bruce Wayne. And I'm hitting that fact because in the early days of his entering into canon, and still to this day sometimes, the fact that he was his biological son placed him above all of the other Bat children. He was the natural heir in some people's eyes. So he was going to go on to be Batman, he should be Robin, so where did that put Tim? There is still an intense rivalry in some circles between Damian fans and Tim fans. Now a lot of it stems from that. Now Damian canonically debuted in 2006. He had made an Elseworlds debut in 1987. And so from there, what to do with Tim? Well, canonically, for a time, he was moved into the role of Red Robin. This was after Dick fired him. It was quite brutal. This was during the time period when Batman, Bruce Wayne, died. He would take on the persona of Red Robin through the New 52 and Rebirth until 2019, where he would be placed back into the Robin role. And there was also a brief period using the ludicrous call sign Drake, because why not take part of your actual name and make it your superhero name? Totally safe. No one will know. What that also signified was that Red Robin was less cemented in the comic reading or public mindset than the other evolved personas, said evolved like they're Pokemon. It didn't have the same resonance as, say, Nightwing and Red Hood, which are the associations that people now make with Dick Grayson and Jason Todd respectively. Whereas Tim was still more heavily associated with Robin, and the fact that he'd featured in the Batman animated universe in that role also helped with that fact. Tim had been such a carefully crafted Robin that it was very difficult for him to break free from that role, and at time of recording he still really hasn't, and some feel that is where he belongs. Tim was around, but for years the talk was, what do we do with him? He's stagnant, he's stuck, nobody cares. Boy, I wish someone would do something with Tim. And oh boy did they, and I have quotes to prove that part of that mentality is how this happened. Enter 2021 and Batman Urban Legends. This series features a bunch of different Batman stories centering around the Bat family, some ongoing across multiple issues. Many ongoing, and then they kind of stagger them. Then you have some one-shots sprinkled in. Now the issue that this change begins in is Batman Urban Legends issue 4. It's called Sum of Our Parts, like some, S-U-M. It's written by Megan Fitzmartin with art by Belen Ortega. So what did Megan have to say about this in the execution? I have quotes. We were looking at what we could do with Tim and what stories we want to tell with Tim. It's been a while since he had his own story. She wanted to say that she wanted to let the character speak what he felt, stating, I know that's a very writerly thing to say, but it really did feel like I was handing over the reins to Tim Drake to say, all right, bud, whatever you want to say, go for it. So let's go for it. Well, let's take a look. We're gonna look at the comic. Oracle to, which codename are you going by now? Are you Red Robin? Just Robin? I'm not calling you Drake. Robin's fine, Oracle. At least while Damian's out of town. So we still haven't dealt with that. Good to know. The story's going to try to deal with that, sort of, but not fully get there. Someone is kidnapping teenagers in Gotham, and Tim is looking into it. This story is highlighting his detective skills and his ability to communicate with younger people, being able to be on street level, essentially, which was always one of his strengths. And then Oracle starts speaking to him, and it goes in a direction that clued many people in. You're scared. You're so incredibly scared that if you use that big, brilliant brain of yours to analyze yourself, what you find is going to change you. This Oracle line lets some people know right away where the story was going. Some of it is past instances or following what's going on in comics in general, and some of it is the phrasing is very similar to how Tim is handled in a lot of fan fiction. Lots of fan fiction centers around the struggle that Tim has with his identity, and oftentimes it leads into him having some kind of queer relationship, and that is because some people read his struggle with identity within the comics themselves as a metaphor for some kind of queer coming out story, or some feel that it's actual coding. Adding to this is the fact that in the next scene he goes to meet an old friend. He's very nervous, he's worrying about his clothes, and those tend to be very romantic tells if you're following the kind of romantic tropes of the genre. You're like, oh, how do I look? How's my hair? This is Bernard, and he is a real character. Some people say he's a random guy, but he exists. He is from the Robin solo series. He's Bernard Dowd. There's even an editor's note talking about him. It gives the last appearance though, not the first. The first appearance was Robin 121, by the way, for anyone who wants to track back to see if there's any potential coding within this relationship. So the two are catching up when suddenly the Chaos Monster shows up. Yes, that is the villain's name, and no, that is not a Silver Age throwback or anything like that. It's just something that belongs on the same level of Henry Abrams' Cadaverous, going in the jar of questionable villain names. It's so Silver Age though. It would feel right at home there. Bernard gets kidnapped, because of course he does, because he's a love interest, and that increases your chances of being kidnapped at least 20%. Next up, we're on to issue 5. Side note, if you're interested in keeping up with the canon of the Bat family and lore and what's happening, this is kind of an essential series because it's setting up a lot of things that are just going to become mainstays or just gonna jump in and hit the ground running. Now, Stephanie and Connell both reach out to Tim because they've been worried about him in general, and now he's acting even odder, or at least they feel that he is. But Tim brushes them off and decides that he's gonna go it alone. Now, the more he looks, the more concerned he gets about finding Bernard, especially when he learns details that he's been hiding injuries like welts on his body. So this story has time skips. We jump forward to the now and then back and the like. So we see in the now that he's gotten himself captured, and we can infer this on purpose so that he can find out some kind of information. He's being tortured and they keep asking him, what does he want? It's supposed to tie in thematically to what is he searching for. But, and this is going to depend upon how you read it or how much you're connecting with it, it does feel a bit like it's trying hard. It doesn't feel well integrated with the story itself. It feels more like it's sitting on top of it, or that it's the primary focus and that the story, the details of say the cults, the kidnappings are really there as backdrop to make sure that this main other message gets forward. This is a cult story. Kids being kidnapped by cults. They've been lured in seemingly by a quest for answers. The cult says they have them, but to get them you need to experience pain. So basically they watched Martyrs many times. Don't go watch Martyrs. Or do, but I warned you. It's disgusting. Why'd I leap to help Detective Williams with a second thought? Why didn't I ask Stephanie or Connor for help? I'm always Robin ever since Batman gave me the cowl. You mean since you stalked and begged to be trained? But go on. It felt good to let go, to embrace the pain. Was Spoiler right? Am I punishing myself? Because hidden under all this is the real question. Who am I if I'm not Robin? I need to figure out what it is I want. These are good Tim-based questions. Not only are they things that he has struggled with, but they're also on a meta level something he is struggling with editorially and internally. Now, it turns out that each of the kids who was kidnapped was different, which was something that they hit on, the fact that there doesn't seem to be any commonality between them aside from the fact that they're kids, and this is because there are different chaos monsters. It's just multiple cult members. Issue 6, they're sacrificing teens. It does feel a bit in some of the skips like there's chunks missing. Part of that is because this is a short story, so it doesn't get the same amount of space as it would if it was its own, just say, backup. So parts of it do feel a bit rushed or like they're not entirely connecting. Part of that is also a stylistic choice with all the time hopping back and forth, which is something that works for some and not for others in the first place. Now they're about to slice Bernard Temple of Doom style, but not if Robin has anything to say about it. Your mask's very scary, definitely. Not easy to infiltrate at all. So Tim just got a new personality for a minute. It's fine. He gets to Bernard, who tells him that he doesn't have to fight alone because he's been training. Batman, me, we're all alone. That's what it means to be a hero, right? I feel like your mileage will vary on how much you feel like that is a Tim thought or not, based on how much Tim you've read and when you've read him and where you've read him from. I like having him here. It's nice. Even though we're outnumbered, I feel calm. It's been a long time since I've been able to say that. Please tell Tim Drake. He helped me realize my true self, who I am. Tell him, well, he probably knows. He's the smartest guy I've ever met, but tell him I wish I could have finished our date. This is what Tim says is his light bulb moment. People keep asking me what I want. Oracle, Dick, Steph, even Connor, but I couldn't grasp it, whatever it was. It was always just out of reach, until now. Until right now. It's like something changed in a program I didn't even know I was running. Or maybe it didn't change, maybe it was always there, waiting for someone to start the program. So we have this moment, which is very clear, but then we have an even more pointed discussion, very on the nose, with the cop that he just met who was helping out. It's supposed to be a sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger moment, and sometimes a stranger just sees you and gets you and they can identify that you're a member of the same group, but mileage will definitely vary. I don't think you chose this. I think this is who you are. You don't know who I am. I broke up with my girlfriend, someone that I love for no reason. If she doesn't understand, you sure don't. I don't think it's that simple. I know what you're going through. I've been through it too. You're holding too tight to a version of yourself you think you have to fit. Let go. You can figure out what you want along the way. Thanks, savant cop. who also very much feels like an author insert, or at least an author's opinion insert, it doesn't come across like a very natural exchange. It comes across like we really need to make sure this point gets across, and then it didn't because DC had to make a statement. However, even though it may not fit well narratively, it did resonate with some people emotionally. And they found the wording and phrasing genuine. I want my family to be safe. I want the mantle. I want. And then he goes to see Bernard. He gets asked on a date and he says yes. And the art is cute. I like this art. And that was the 3 issues. All right, take a deep breath. Get ready. Do some cringe exercises. We're gonna go into the reactions. So firstly, there are people who just the coming out aspect of the story and some of the dialogue rang very true and they found it very validating. And for some, that could supersede the story itself, i.e. the intent and end result more important than the package. And some feel it was well delivered and that there wasn't anything wrong with the story. And some who did enjoy the moment just want to enjoy it. They want to experience it, they don't want to analyze it. They just want it to be. And so some don't appreciate it, even resent the discourse or being dragged into it. Though others would argue if you post something online, then people are gonna say stuff about it. While others say yes, but there's no need for cruelty or douchery or in some cases outright bigotry. So what were DC's statements about this? Well, one read, Tim Drake dates boys, for those who were confused. And some were, genuinely. They also released a piece on queer coding, which ended with, Tim Drake Nation, rise up, there's no turning back now. So while some argue this was not a change, but people just assuming Tim was straight because of heteronormativity, others feel that any decision in a narrative is a change. Now, while it has been reported that LGBTQ+ fans are ecstatic and that the change is universally beloved, and then articles pull a tweet or two, as is the standard for a very quick get it out there article. The turnaround at these companies is very quick, and so it just needs to be pushed out the door. However, the LGBTQ community are not a monolith. Not everybody thinks the same in a group, no matter what that group is. There's diversity of opinion and thought, and you can get pushback even from within those groups, which has happened, as well as acceptance. There tends to be a tendency to group all of complaints coming from one source, and then of course there are some louder members of the group who will then rise to the occasion, lower themselves to the occasion. However, sources of acceptance and rejection on ground individual level are varied. Also, there has been some, I'm gonna use a word that sets off some viewers, interesting overlap in some groups. As mentioned earlier, it is possible to be having different conversations about this, and it can get charged. Even if you're having the same conversation, it can get charged. So let's try and break this down coherently. One complaint is that this change feels unnecessary, i.e. it doesn't add anything to the character, that the sexuality is not a huge part of Tim, that Tim is still Tim either way. Though of course some counter then with, so then it doesn't matter if he is, and argue it is important and helps build acceptance and showcase new stories and give voice to a different set of readers. Some are concerned that with this change there is still a good chance that Tim could fade back into obscurity, that he may get 1 or 2 stories surrounding this change. He was promised at least a follow-up in Batman Urban Legends issue 10, so there is more Tim coming. However, some worry that the fade into obscurity, which was a core issue of what was going on with Tim, the question still lingers, who is Tim and where does he belong? And this date with Bernard for some doesn't change that in any way. What is Tim doing still? Aside from having a good dinner, hopefully. I hope Bernard takes him someplace nice. A lot of it was left on and we'll figure it out later. So some felt this was not a good foundation for actual representation, but the author wanting her opinions to get across. As for instance, in a BBC4 radio interview, she stated that Tim's sexuality felt like this missing piece to his character. That is a sentiment that is shared by some. Some have said that they felt that Tim was the most logical choice if one was going to change a character like this. Now some rankled at this because they worry that the author is fetishizing Tim or fetishizing Tim's sexuality. This is a common complaint in certain segments of queer communities, and also just a complaint in general, that male-on-male relationships can be fetishized, particularly by females and particularly in the shipping and fangirl and fandom communities. So some were concerned that that was what was happening here, and that the reason it makes so much sense to the author is because it's her headcanon made manifest. The plot in this starts out decently, but then gets very thin. The cult, the chaos monster, they fade into the background, and the rhetoric around him finding himself begins to take the foreground. And then you have characters like the GCPD officer, who exists very much just to validate Tim. So while some enjoy the concept, they feel the execution was lacking, that the story could have been told better or been even stronger, and that the story could have really accented some of the really earnest work that was being done with discussing Tim's identity. Now just as the LGBTQ community is not a monolith, it's not stagnant, nor are discussions around this topic. Stories about coming out and discovering oneself, they're always changing, always evolving, evolving. There can be generational gaps, regional gaps, just individual gaps. So some really resonate with the idea of just coming to discover something about yourself, and that can seem abrupt to the people outside you, but really it's been a process inside of yourself that even you weren't aware of. While others feel that may be well and good for reality, but in a story you need to have building blocks, and they feel those weren't there. Now some are against changing sexualities no matter how it is handled, just on principle. Now some people feel that's because you need to stay the course with the characters or create new characters, and for others it does come from a source of bigotry or homophobia. Now some also make the argument that Tim didn't have a lot going on, and that this can be a chance to revitalize the character. Which has led to another concern, one that has not happened yet time of recording, is the fact that bi representation when a character comes out tends to focus on the character having same-sex relationships, which many bisexual individuals feel is a misrepresentation, or shows a lack of understanding, or can actually be hurtful, and that it can feel performative, as if the character needs to prove that they are bisexual, and that the only way to do so is to be in a same-sex relationship. Another complaint is that these characters are often portrayed as very promiscuous. We've been hurt before. So there are some for whom the focus is on story first, and they fall in a variety of categories, whether pro this idea or against it. Now there are some people who are saying things like Stephanie Brown was his beard, or this is a big disrespect to Stephanie. However, that's again a misunderstanding of bisexuality, so that's not the case. Also, the story was quite nice to Stephanie. It didn't belittle her or anything like that. This is treated as a realization that Tim himself is coming to. In some ways, some have read the line as Tim broke up with his girlfriend for no reason, as the author not understanding why, and so this was the only rationale she could think of. There's also a theory floating out there, because we're just going to give you all the things. I put a tinfoil hat on, but my hair is too big. And that is that James Tynion IV is a TimKon shipper, and so this is the long game to eventually get Tim and Connor together, because there were a lot of Tim Connor moments that have happened, especially after he died. Now there is an assertion floating around that the people both pro and against don't actually read comics. You'll hear this one a lot. So the idea, if you like it, you don't read comics, you just like the representation. You don't like it, you don't read comics, you're just angry that they're changing, they're not for you anymore. There's a new audience to appeal to. Of course, with such a wide shot, some of those accusations are going to land, but you really don't know whether the person you're talking to reads comics or not. It's just an assumption. It's a very dismissive assumption. You only find out by if they say so, or if I'm creeping myself out now. Don't try and find out if the people are reading or not reading. I'm scared. There were also some accusations out there that the author knew nothing about Tim, but that is clearly not the case. Bernard is a deep cut, and he wasn't the most important character, so to be able to bring him up, remember him, and remember some of his likes and dislikes, like his video game, he loved video games. Also, when it came to the people who were brought up in the story, they were relevant people to Tim. Dick, Connor, Stephanie. Although, of course, this is the very Lost Boy Tim, as you get in the later era after he's displaced. He does struggle with that a bit before, especially with how can he balance everything, but it comes out a lot more after he's fired. It's a dick moment, Dick. If you're not just against the concept on principle, then the idea of someone realizing that they have deeper feelings for a friend than they knew is potentially not a bad way to intro these feelings. Also, him saying that he wants to take on the mantle is kind of a really big deal. It's just kind of dropped in there. And of course, some people don't care and wonder why everyone is so mad or so happy, as some people feel there's too much value placed on fictional stories these days. Or alternatively, that this shouldn't matter, that this shouldn't be a big deal, that this should just be normal, that a boy going on a date with another boy is not the end of the world, or the end of the comic book industry. There have, of course, been some genuine homophobic responses to this. It's gotten quite ugly. And there have been those who are concerned that this is a signal, another shift that comics are driving towards embracing more identity-driven storylines and woke ideologies. Side note, that is a word that I cannot wait for it to fall out of fashion. Sometimes there are just words that you can't wait for it to fall out of common parlance. Now, some feel frustrated that anything viewed as progressive leaning is automatically labeled as woke, no matter what it is. But wait, there's more. Some have argued that Tim was always queer-coded. Coding is the process wherein characters are given traits of a certain group of people without explicitly naming that character as a member of this group. So basically, it's supposed to be with hints and clues that if you're in that community or in the know, you'll recognize, but if not, they could fly over your head. The thing is, this often relies on stereotyping, and it can also be misinterpreted. For example, people thinking that it's there when it's not. And then sometimes you've even had authors not put it there but then lean into it afterwards. And this can be very difficult to navigate because there are times when it really is happening, like Mystique and Destiny. Another factor is with characters with long histories, some creators may do it and others may not. Now, some say this isn't Tim specific, but Robin specific, all Robins across the board. This was the stance taken by the DC Comic website in a piece posted, an article on queer coding. I have quotes, you know I got quotes. Queer coding in comics, the idea of expressing your true self yourself through a colorful costume as you hid your dual identity from the world was once considered too scandalous for a largely homophobic nation. And despite a multitude of new Robins, each with a parade of their own heteronormative partners, queer readers have continued to see a piece of themselves within the boy wonder. Queer readings of Robin continue to proliferate through his stories. Specifically on Tim, he had this to say: "The moment that a Robin, any Robin, but particularly a Robin with history and now decades of queer-coded readings under his belt, was allowed to be the queer icon he's always been." They then list a bunch of ships. I'm not going to name them all, but they do Dick Wally, TimKon, Damien John, the big ones, and a bunch more. They specify here that this happens with queer readers, but this also happens with straight readers too, which brings up the headcanon argument for all readers, regardless of sexuality, especially if one's ships. There is a discussion to be had because there is a question of where do headcanon and shipping converge with canon intent and interpretation. So it's not entirely quite a closed book as some make it seem. The case you can make for Tim is strong though. Many moments surrounding Connor, the wearing of the shirt, the resurrection arc. People are sharing moments out there that they feel are coded, so please do so down below. If you're curious, it's out there. Some felt that the story would actually have been stronger if this had happened with Connor. Some people feel that this is more a discussion on the history of coding as applied to Robin, but it presupposes coding being present, which not everybody has been able to agree upon. And some feel that certain examples like Tim and Con bonding in a literal closet, or Tim telling a gay hero to go to Pride, or him struggling with who he is aren't huge signals, but just moments, while others argue that's the point. For me, this whole topic is a fascinating discussion. However, some find it frustrating or even angering. We all have different experiences and different reactions. On that note, some are enjoying that this feels a bit like an FU to Werthem, because he was very much the whole, the Batman and Robin are gay and he's gonna make the kids gay. So some feel this is a bit of a thumb up the nose to those who didn't want a queer Robin. So they're enjoying it on the same level as when Batwoman was brought back as a lesbian, the new updated Batwoman, after the first original Batwoman had been created to be a love interest for Batman, largely in response to the book to make sure that it didn't seem like he was gay. Now, as for our ultimate intent, Megan, the author, had this to say: "My goal in writing has been and will always be to show just how much God loves you. You're so incredibly loved and important and seen. Forever grateful to be trusted with Tim Drake and his story, and honored to work with the amazingly talented Belen Ortega and Loki Son Alex." So as always with these things, it's a lot of a lot. Personally, while very earnest and well-intentioned and a decent representation of discovering hidden feelings, I wish the character introspection had been better woven into the kidnapping cult plot. And also I wish it had been given a few more parts in the anthology leading up to the issue 10 because it did feel a bit rushed. Also, the time skip method of back and forth was awkward and at points didn't flow very well. So it felt like there were chunks missing and they were details about the cult plot. But now I want you to tell me how you feel. Did you like the story? Do you feel that Tim was always coded? Did this resonate? Are you a fan of these types of changes? Why or why not? Are you a Tim Drake fan? Where do you feel is his place in the DC universe? Is he still the one true Batman? Talking about these things can be fraught, but it feels important to do so. That's not a sentiment that everybody shares, I know. I got this request for this video a lot specifically, and I know for some it was because they were curious as to whether I loved or hated it. But personally for me, that's not what these videos are about. I'm more interested in how these things unfold and having conversations about them than just spewing my feelings all over the place. I'm not that interesting. I'm sure I didn't cover everything or that I missed certain viewpoints, so please, if I did, talk to me, comment, and hopefully we can have some interesting conversations and they don't get too vitriolic. A man can dream. I've rambled on long enough. Do the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time of your day to spend it discussing comics with me. I really appreciate it. Seriously, thank you. All of you make these videos easier to make. So thank you. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.